All right. So if you guys remember, about a month ago, I guess exactly, it was actually the 8th of last month, I taught on a subject that's almost kind of off limits in the church a little bit, maybe. And that off limits topic was a 3-letter word that starts with S. And so I'm not going to get into that today. Today we're going to cover a different off limits topic. Another one that whenever we talk about, people kind of get a little clammy. It gets a little bit awkward. Whenever you invite someone to church, you kind of hope your pastor doesn't teach about this, typically. But we preach verse by verse, so we preach what comes. And so this week we're going to be talking about money and how we should think about money and possessions in terms of what it means to be a Christian. And while I don't personally like teaching on money, it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes most people think I'm trying to get your money as a pastor, because that's what pastors do a lot of, trying to take people's money. Not my intention here this morning. My intention is to simply help us frame our minds about what it means to look around at possessions and stuff and money and think about it well. Think about it in terms of the gospel. And so, but if we're honest, most people measure their worth. That's the word we're going to use a lot today. They measure their worth by their money and possessions, right? The term we use is net worth. Like how many in here this week have thought about your net worth? Or if you're like me, I've Googled, saw somebody on television, I'm wondering what is their net worth? Anybody else do that? I do that all the time. This week I read the newest Hunger Games book, and Suzanne Collins. So I thought, man, how much money has she made off this series? The answer is $55 million. That's how much she's worth. $55 million. That's a lot of money. And in my brain, I'm thinking, oh, she's of a lot of value. She's a very high value person. Right? And the truth is, we don't just become obsessed with other people's worth and other people's wealth. It's usually our main focus. Right? It's the only thing we think about a lot of times on a daily basis is money. How am I going to get through the day? How am I going to pay for my stuff? How am I going to put my money into these bank accounts so that I use it well? It just consumes our mind. Right? And to be honest, we will do almost anything to get it. Right? We work 80 hours a week. We don't spend time with our families. We don't invest in the things that matter because we want this worth. Right? We send our kids to babysitters so that we can work more in order to build it. Nothing wrong with having babysitters, but hear me out. We do this all the time. Right? We prioritize money over anything else in life. It becomes another God that competes with our God, if we're honest about it. But here's this beautiful quote by Charles Spurgeon. He says, "It's not how much you have, but how much you enjoy that makes happiness." And more importantly than how much you enjoy is enjoying the one that gives it to you. Much more than it is even enjoying the things themselves is enjoying the giver. To have communion with God himself and knowing that everything I give is simply a gift. It's simply grace, and I just get it. Not because I did anything to earn it. But that's the way we think in life, is earning. Even if you've done a lot and earned a lot of money, it's still a gift. And God expects us to use it well. And so, right, you've heard it said before. How many times have you heard Christians say this kind of funny phrase? They say, they're so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. Anybody ever heard people say that before? So this idea that people pray and they just, kind of spend time alone with God and they're not actually contributing. But if we're honest, the opposite is typically true of us. We're so earthly minded that we're no heavenly good. That's true of almost all of us in here today. That we get so consumed with the things of this world, with our status, with our money, with the way people think about us, that we contribute nothing to the kingdom of heaven. I, even as a pastor, get swept up in this. Let's not pretend that we don't. And so today, I want to encourage us as God's people to find our worth in things that actually matter. Money doesn't matter. Can you use it well? Yes. But it's not a good measuring symbol of your worth as a human being. It's a poor status. And so today we're going to be working through the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to be today and continuing out of the section we talked about last week about being religious, going through religious actions in order to be seen. And now we're going to be going through this section of how we use our things well. how we use our possessions well as God's people. And so please stand with me for the reading of Matthew 6, only verses 19 through 24, and then we will get into it. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. So essentially, you can see it in the way that the verses are broke up on here. We're going to cover this in 3 different sections. If you're a note taker or someone who likes to have a visual outline, we're going to break it down verses 19 through 21, which is kind of the thesis of what he's trying to say. We're going to be 22 and 23, which will be an illustration of what he means. And 24 is kind of going to be this like punchy call, like this almost statement that should cause us to stir a little bit. Jesus does this all the time where he almost uses extreme language in order to get you motivated in doing something, right? And so he does this here as well. But so let's just start out, keep it very simple with a word study, right? Because I think in order to understand, right, as I've said 100 times, this wasn't written in English. This wasn't written in King James Version. This was written in Greek. And so in order to understand what it means, we need to do a little bit of Greek word study because it's actually interesting what you see here in Greek. It looks very different than it does in English. So it says, do not lay up for yourself treasure on earth. This is interesting, but the term lay up and treasure are actually the same root word. They're the word thesaurus. Does that sound like any other word you know, right? Thesaurus, right? It's the exact same word. Essentially, what is a thesaurus, right? It's a gathered group of words, right? So that's the idea of what it means. That it's just you come and you gather things up and you keep them stored. And you don't use them, you just keep them nice and safe in the little book. And so, right, he's saying, don't on this earth just store up stored things. How much do we do that? We just want to store stuff. We want to store as much money as we can in our bank accounts for the future. We store Pokemon cards. You can go on down the line. We're hoarders. And the idea is don't hoard up for yourself treasures on earth. Because and he's getting at here, the word just means don't store up stored things. The storehouse is the idea. And it's not just money. That's what we think of. But it could be anything, right? He alludes to food. Don't just store up food. I don't know if it's as big as it used to be. Do you remember when everybody used to want to have a cellar and just shove all the canned goods they could into it out of fear of the future? So I think that's kind of what he's getting at is don't be so over-consumed with the future that you don't live today. Don't be over-consumed with trying to store up all this money for tomorrow that you can't love people right here, right now, because you're just so in the grain of that. Right? And the idea is that he's trying to get across here of how silly it is. Right? Look at kind of this example he gives where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. He's trying to get across the idea that everything is temporary. Money, if your house catches on fire and you have a bunch of cash, gone. The only way you're getting it back is if you have really good house insurance, right? If you have a car and you're driving home and it blows up, you're out of car, right? On down the line, all these things that we dump our entire life into having, all these comforts, all the things of this world that with just one act of nature, gone. I mean, let's be honest. Who in here this week that was the main thought that consumed you? Is how much money can I make? How can I be as efficient as I can to make it? And then what do I do with it once I have it? Do I buy stuff that makes me happy or do I put it away? If we're honest about it, there's almost the only thing we think of from week to week. We almost forget that we can use our money in other ways. Right? But here's what Jesus is trying to be so clear about. He's trying to say, everybody, listen. The things of this world are not worth your heart. They're not worth investing in. They're not worth putting your effort into because they could just be gone tomorrow. And there's nothing you could do about it. No matter how much you try to hoard, no matter how much you try to do, one act of God, right? The insurance company even literally call it that, an act of God. It's all just out. Right? So it's not worth your worship. It's not worth your effort. It's not worth your time. Right? And in comparison to true treasure, it's all worthless. And so, right? Instead, he says, put your effort into treasure in heaven, into this, right? The literal translation would be sky stuff. Don't put your money in earth stuff. Put your effort into sky stuff. So what's he talking about here? And so essentially, let me clarify. Let me back up for just a second. I'm not saying that you should never put $1 into your bank account and be wise about the future. Don't hear me say that this morning. I'm not saying you should put money in your Roth IRA and be wise about your finances for the future. Right? Being wise is important, right? Proverbs 21:20, it won't be up there, but it says, the wise man stores up food and oil, but the foolish man devours all that he has. Right? And so the heart posture is that the wise man sees himself as a good steward of God's things. That he sees everything that he owns as God's stuff. And instead of just blowing it, getting rid of it, spending it on himself, he wisely uses it. Whether it be saving a little bit for tomorrow to use well, he stores it all up well. And then the fool, right? The fool essentially spends all he has because the earth is all he has. All he has is right here, right now. What can I make for myself? And if we're honest about it, man, I slip into that mindset every day. Is all that matters is this moment and how much I can get for myself in this moment. And so it's just this heart posture of like, we need more. We need more of the good things, more of the godly things. So instead of placing our treasures in earth, we place our treasures in heaven. Meaning we put our effort, we put our investments into things that matter. We put our investments into the things that don't die, right? Particularly, we put our investment in people. Right? We invest in our children and teaching them the things that they know to thrive in life. We invest in our spouses. We invest in caring for them and loving the way that Christ loved. Let's be honest this week, guys. Who put more effort into money than you did your spouse this week? Me. I did too. How do we fix that? How do we change our minds to where we see the things of heaven as infinitely more important than the things of earth? Right? I pray right now that we simply look upon the cross, look upon Jesus, and see that we've been given everything. Right? That's the basis of this. Is that you can give away all you have if you have everything. Right? Think about people who have all the money in the world. They can just throw money at stuff, and it's just like, oh, who cares? It's flippant. Because we've been given so much in Christ, we can, like, the earthly possessions shouldn't mean anything to us. If it's a means to worshiping God, if it's a means to caring for my neighbor, it should just be like this, right? He says that we are poor in spirit, right? Remember that in the Beatitudes? He says that we should be poor in spirit, meaning I know that I contribute nothing to this. I know that I, in and of myself, can't create good things. So when I get them, I can hand them out with joy. I can hand them out with love because this is where my hope is found. My hope is found in Jesus, not in having some future security. Right? It's just an absolutely beautiful thing. And then he says, and let's just be honest about it. At the end of your life, if you look, people rarely say, man, I wish I made more money. People will never say, man, I wish I'd have put more money in my retirement. People say, I wish I'd have spent more time with my family. I wish I would have invested deeper in the people around me. I wish I would have cared for my church better. I wish I would have loved my spouse better. Are you worried about things that matter or things that don't matter? The things of the Spirit matter. The things of this world, while they matter, I won't say they won't matter. They don't matter. They do matter because they are means by which the other things happen. We need money. Like, we had to pay our bills, we had to survive, all that. I get that. It makes sense. But they're all resources given to us for the secondary thing, for the second thing, which is to glorify and worship God himself. I mean, verse 21 is really the key to this whole text. He says, where your treasure is, your heart will also be. I think this is an interesting statement, and I really think there's kind of two ways to look at it, and I think Jesus intends both of them. One is this figurative way where he says, right, what you invest in, where the treasure of your heart is, you will follow, right? So if you spend your time investing in things that matter, eventually your heart will follow along with it. Right? If you take your money and you give it to things that is actually helping the needy, caring for, like helping people know the gospel, your heart will follow in that direction. But I think there's also this, and this is really, really convicting to me, that where your treasure is, right? Treasure meaning the possessions that you have. It's also an indicator of where your heart is, right? That Jesus is saying that when you spend your money and you use your possessions, it's the direct reflection of what your heart actually values. Right? I want to ask you this today. If you opened up your bank account and you went through all the transactions, what would it say you loved? Right? It's going to say, I love convenience. I love stuff. I love just feeling whatever my heart desires. I love, right, as Paul would say, I love the God of my belly, right? That I just want to eat and consume. And if you were to look at your bank account, it's a pretty good reflection of what you actually value in life. I think that's helpful. I want to encourage you to do that this week. And obviously it's not perfect, but it's not a perfect reflection. A lot of times the spiritual things don't show on your bank account. I get that. But I think it is an indicator as to what we're wasting our money on when we could be using it for better godly things. And I'm not saying you should never have fun. I'm not saying you should never do things that are enjoyable. You should. That's godly. That's good. But I do think it's a good indicator of what you actually value. Because you spend money on what you value. And so, yeah. So, and then on the second section here, it's kind of this metaphor. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, then how great is the darkness? I mean, I'm going to keep this short and simple because you could get into a lot here of like historical context and how the light in that time was kind of seen as a reflection of the inner person. And so, but essentially what he's getting at with this analogy is this term healthy in the context and the way that it would have been written, and then the word bad, actually healthy would be more like generous. So like the eye is the lamp of the body. So if you're a generous person, you'll be full of light. And if you're a person who is completely content in the person of Jesus and willing to give all that you have to that means, then your whole body your whole life is going to reflect that. Like if you're a person who in your heart is truly generous, like, I want you to know what I know, I want you to have what I have, then your whole life is going to be shaped in the direction of God. But if your eye is bad, if your eye is greedy, it's going to do the opposite effect. If you have a greedy eye, it's going to lead you away from the light. It's going to blind you. So many times we want to be greedy and Christians. Not an option. Right? Jesus literally calls them two masters, two gods to follow. Right? So often we want to be greedy people, but also just tack Christianity onto the back of it so that maybe he'll give us more money. Maybe he'll make it even better for us if I follow Jesus. If I follow Jesus, I'll be even more greedy because he'll give me stuff for being good. Right? You can see the heart posture here is damaging and broken and horrific. Like God doesn't necessarily want to give you money. It's not his primary thing he wants to give you. He wants to give you life. And life doesn't mean stuff. Life means that you get communion with God today and tomorrow and for all eternity. And so, we need to be serious about this. Right? If you were to check the illumination today of your heart, are you a generous person? Are you a greedy person? I'm a greedy person a lot of days, if I'm honest about it. And then verse 24, he says, no one can serve two masters. Right? And this isn't a concern of employment necessarily, right? I can't say you can't have two bosses because a lot of people, that's almost the way we think about it. Is Jesus is my boss and I follow him part of my days, and then money is my other boss, and so I can kind of split it up however I'd like to as long as I'm doing the Jesus stuff sometimes too. But he essentially says, no, that's not an option because it's not a question of employment. It's a question of ownership. Who owns you? Does God own you or does money own you? right? It's this idea of single ownership, full-time service, right? A master can call upon his subject at any moment, right? Would you be closer to follow Jesus if he called you or to follow the money? Oh, that's tough. Would you be closer to follow Jesus if he called you to do something wild? If he called you to sell your home to give it to the poor? Or would you be more likely to jump on some quick money scheme in order to get a bunch? Right? It shows what our heart values. Because the reality is, I'm going to jump on the money. Let's be honest about it. A lot of us would. It's just an inclination of our hearts. And this is interesting. It says you cannot serve God and money. The way Jesus says this in Greek is actually super cool. It doesn't say God and money. Like, the term isn't money. It says mammon. You cannot serve God and mammon. And the term mammon means wealth, but he doesn't use it as a common noun. He uses it as a proper noun, meaning it's a name. So meaning, like, literally, Jesus is saying, you have to choose today between two gods. Are you going to choose the God of money? Or are you going to choose the everlasting God who is going to die for you and give you true life? Like that's the question at hand. It's not necessarily do you love money or do you love God. It's which one is your God? Which one do you worship? Which one do you actually follow? I think that's really cool that he does it that way, right? It's not just money. It almost seems lesser, but he frames it as this God that we have to choose between. Like, will you follow Yahweh, the everlasting God of the universe, or will you follow Mammon, this lesser false God who promises the world? Promises he'll give you everything, but will leave you empty. Man, let's go back to the beginning of this. Let's go back to the idea of worth. This is going to be a short sermon this morning. What is your worth in here this morning, and how do you weigh it? Like, how do you, like, if someone asks you, what are you worth? Right? You're probably going to go to the question of money, right? That would be your initial, how do I count this up? What's the idea? Let me tell you what Jesus thinks you're worth. Let me tell you how Jesus values you this morning. Because you are worth nothing. You are sinful. You are broken. You're just like me. I have nothing to contribute to the things of God. I'm a sinner. I run away from God on a daily basis. I do all the things that I shouldn't do. But despite that reality, he dies for us. Jesus finds you worthy enough to die for you. How beautiful is that? Right? That despite how much you fail, despite how much you mess up, he climbs upon the cross with you in mind and lays down his life. And he says, because of this reality, you have infinite worth. That there's nothing that can take your worth from you, because we give it all in the person of Jesus, that through him we have received every spiritual blessing. I want to plead with you in here. Choose the right God this morning, which is Jesus himself, who doesn't promise empty things and comes up short. That's what money does. That's what the God of Mammon does. But Jesus comes in. He says, I don't promise to give you money. I don't promise to give you all this stuff. I promise to give you true life, which means in the midst of things going on that you can stand firm and say, he is good and he has my best for me. You can stand in the face of cancer and say, he's better than it. And if I lost my life, that I get him. You can stand in the face of bankruptcy and say, it's better. I get Jesus. I don't need all the stuff. I have Jesus. I plead with you to choose him this morning rather than the other. It's not even, he's infinitely more worthy. The other one isn't worth any of your heart. Do not choose the wrong God this morning. All right, so as we close that, I want to ask you just one question. What are you setting your mind and your resources on this week? What are you setting your mind and your resources on this week? Romans 8 is going to be able to say, for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. For to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. Where's your mind this morning? Is your mind on how do I make another dollar? How do I make another penny? How do I get further ahead in this game of life? Or is your mind on the things of the Spirit, saying all that I have is a gift from God, and I can stand here with open hands saying, whatever, do with whatever I have as you will, God. Here's my house. How do I use it for your glory? Here's my money. How do I use it for your glory? Here are my children. How do I use them? and care for them in a way that glorifies you. Join me in prayer.